Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Intuitive Catalyst podcast. I'm Leilani, your host, and today we are joined with my shamanic mentor and teacher, Scott Silverstone. Scott is the founder of Shamanic Spirit Medicine and a leading international shamanism teacher serving students and clients in dozens of countries across the world. Shamanic Spirit Medicine is a proprietary method for using shamanic consciousness to heal dysfunctional patterning by overwriting traumatic and self-limiting imprints acquired from negative life experiences. Scott emphasizes the need for balanced and effective self-care for healing arts practitioners. His mission is to help people return to our natural role of caretakers, stewards, and healers of the web of life by normalizing shamanic consciousness as an accessible and necessary part of modern human society. Scott holds a BA in economics from Duke University and is the former director of a major private international trade finance firm who quit the corporate world to dedicate his career to helping people and to making a positive impact on the web of life. Scott is such a gift to me. We talk a little bit about this in the episode of how I came to find his medicine and his teaching. And when I think of Scott, I think of how much more grounded I am in my shamanism because I had him as a teacher. We go to all of the places, so buckle up. It is not all love and light in the world of shamanism. We talk about the shadows and what is required in order for us to live in integrity and how to look out for healing practitioners who don't always have our best interests at heart. So I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it with my friend and mentor and teacher, Scott Silverstone. Scott, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
Thank you, Leilani. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great today and really honored to be on your show. Thank you so much.
And Scott, those of you have already heard, Scott is a mentor, my shaman teacher. We've been working together for years now. But Scott, the first question I ask everybody is, who are you? What is your big work in the world? And how do you source from your intuition to do your work?
Okay, thanks, Leilani. Well, my name's Scott Silverstone, and I was born in New York City, of all places, and raised in Manhattan, which is not the place that you would usually find an earth-based shamanic person, but that's where I grew up. And so I grew up actually very disconnected from the web of life, disconnected from what I would call right relationship, disconnected from even who my true self is, who I am in my true self. And through a process of self-healing and self-discovery and all the challenges that go along with that process, I came to shamanism in 1996 in northern Arizona, where I went to an energy healer and started to work with her, and then she started to teach me shamanism, and I started to train with her once a week for 3 years. And that's where I started to get my background in shamanism, and it really resonated with me. And I began to see for myself what others were trying to share with me from the outside about how I could use my potential to make a positive contribution to the web of life. I've always been intuitive. I've always been highly intuitive and highly empathic. When I was, 5 or 6, my older cousin, who she was about 18 at the time, would always have me, oh, massage my neck. Oh, you do this better than the paid massage therapist. I'm like a 5-year-old, and it's just, some people have that natural gift that flows through them. And so I was born with the ability to feel, both through my fingers and in a intuitive capacity, to feel energy, to know without words being spoken. It took a long time growing up in a highly materialistic society in Manhattan to reconcile those experiences with what I was being taught on the outside. So there was quite a lot of inner conflict that I needed to resolve within myself. And when I finally did resolve that, this work started to come through me as a way to first help others in session work and later to teach. And so part of my path after learning to do the healing work is I founded and ran a backcountry outdoor hiking adventure company here on the island of Kauai for about 10 years. And that got me out in nature and listening to nature. And that has always been my refuge, to be in nature where it's quiet so I could listen to the web of life, listen to the spirits of the land, get clear within myself. I still go every day to nature in the mornings to balance myself, give thanks in the morning, for remember who I am, right? And then one day, my wife, at that time, she wasn't my wife, I was just dating her, came on a tour with me while I was taking some clients hiking. And my wife had been in the healing arts for many, many years at that time. And at the end of the day, after we dropped off the guest, she goes, "Scott, you're not doing hiking tours." I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You're holding space for people for 10 hours and you're charging them for a tour. You can't do that. That's not sustainable." I go, "What? It's just fun. I like being out there." She goes, "No, you need to use those gifts in a different way. You need to distinguish between what you're doing when you're taking people to nature and what you're doing when you're helping them heal. And if you provide both, then, say you're providing both, but, really consider doing, offering your healing work as a separate service." And so, of course, I was highly resistant, and me never, right? So I was highly resistant. I was highly resistant because not because it was coming from outside of me, but because I felt that I had some internal programming that I wouldn't be able to. It wasn't like a valid career path for me, I guess you'd say. And so I struggled with that. And then after working through that with the help of my wife, I said, "Okay, you know what? I need to offer this because this is part of who I am," fully expecting that nobody in their right mind would want to book a session with me because, that was just my own insecurities happening. And so I said, "You know what? I'm going to put up a website for shamanic healing work. I'm going to put up a website for Tai Chi that I teach, just because this is an integral part of who I am, and I need to make this offering to the world. Even if nobody shows up, I need to at least put it out there." And with doing zero advertising, all of a sudden people started to show up for both.
Wow.
Okay. And especially for the shamanic work. So first it started with, one person booked, and I was like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting. Someone booked a session with me. Huh." And then I did the session. It was great. And they referred some people. And then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 people were booking. And then all of a sudden within a few months, I was booked to capacity, doing, 10, 12 sessions a week, which is a lot of shamanic sessions when they're 2 hours long. I wasn't offering distance sessions at the time. I was just doing them in person. And it was just, wow, it just took off without me doing anything. It was all people just finding me, and I had no idea. Had no idea that there was such a need. And so as that continued, a couple of years later, a woman from Australia contacted me, and she was a professional kinesiologist in Sydney. And she said, "Hey, I'm coming to Kauai for 5 weeks in April, and I'd love to learn what you do." So I said, "Oh, yeah, okay. Sure, I guess I can teach you." I had no idea what I was going to teach her. And so she said, "Well, can you just do a distance session first to make sure that it's the right fit?" I said, "Sure." So we did a distance session. She was like, "Oh my God, that was an amazing session. Yes, yes, yes. Let's create a program." So I said, "Why don't we meet 3 or 4 days a week while you're here, and I will teach you what I do." And we included also a week where we went up into the mountains and camped, and I did a lot of teaching up there, like soul retrieval and extraction and kind of session work up there. And so she came, and I prepared my day 1 lecture, which is a little bit, well, it's evolved since then, but essentially what I teach on the day 1 of the fundamentals of shamanism. And she loved it, and I taught her how to journey that day to the lower world and meet her power animal, and she was able to. And then she went home and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to teach her next? Come back in 2 days, I said, and what am I going to teach her next? And so I journeyed for myself. I asked my guides, I said, what should I teach this person next? What's the thing that she needs to learn next for her own development as a person, as a healer, et cetera, et cetera. And I got day 2. And so day 2 came through and I said, this is what we're going to do today. And it was the perfect guidance. I said, okay, this is how I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do it day by day. Okay, so she's going to come back. I said, come back in 2 or 3 days. We set a time. Same thing when we repeated that process basically for the entire 5 weeks.
Wow.
And what was really fascinating, so this was the outline or the rough draft of what our entire apprenticeship program is right now. The four classes: the energy buddy class, the fundamental shamanic self-mastery, and advanced shamanic healing, grew out of this month 5-week experience. And so it was all essentially channeled and given to me through my guides, through my ancestors and my guides, to help this one person, but also to create a template of something larger that I had no idea was even being created in that moment. I was just focused on working this one person and helping her because she asked. And I had no vision and no intention of doing that ever again with anybody else. I was just going to go back to doing sessions. But what was really fascinating was about halfway through her course, she had been struggling with addiction to a mild addiction to smoking marijuana and drinking after work. So here's someone, she had a jam-packed schedule doing healing work as a kinesiologist, being highly empathic. She'd see 10, 12 clients in a day, which is a big client load, in my opinion. And then immediately afterwards, she'd go to the pub, have a few drinks, go home and take a couple of bong rips or smoke a joint. And she said to me, she said, and I made it very clear with her. I said, when you come during this 5 weeks, and I didn't know this about her, I just do this with everyone, you're not allowed to drink or smoke 24 hours before any session we have. And she had written back to me and she said, I've been struggling with this. It's a habit I want to change. And I'm not going to do it. So great. Okay, we're on the same page. She agreed. So here we are a few weeks into it, and she's really, she's sticking to her word. She's not drinking. She's not smoking. And one day she comes in, she goes, Scott, oh my God, the most amazing thing happened last night, between the last session and now. She goes, last night and the night before were the first night since I was 14 years old where I wasn't craving getting high. I go, that's interesting. And she goes, yeah, I didn't smoke the whole time because that's what we agreed to. I'm keeping our agreement, but it's been a struggle. And last night was the first time where it hasn't been a struggle. And, she was in her mid-30s, so in 20 years. And I go, wow, that's amazing. And it made me realize, and that was right at the point where we were working with commanding the second attention and overriding the agreements we make about ourselves, the world, and our place within the world. And we had just shifted that agreement within her. She had done it in her own journeys. And we didn't have any intention about working on the addiction, on the smoking or drinking habit. That wasn't even addressed. It wasn't even talked about. But when we shifted that agreement about something else, all of a sudden, that habit went away. And I was like, oh, I'm really onto something here. I knew this was effective, but now I see why it's effective. And so that really helped me to understand what gifts can come through this type of healing, when we can help people overwrite these unhealthy patterns, unhealthy agreements that have been imprinted in them often or almost always without their consent. Almost always without their consent. It's almost always either in mimicry of what our caregivers are, or in reaction to some type of event or series of events that have befallen us. And so that was fascinating to me. And at the very end of our time together, and you'll know this from the classes that we've done together, well, the last journey that I do in every class is completion and the path forward, what is my path forward from here? And what have I learned? Summary of what I've learned and what's my path forward. Okay. And so in that journey, I was shown a still pond and a pebble dropping into the pond and ripples moving outwards from the center. That very classic Zen ripple photo looked just like that in my journey. And I was shown, oh, this is the ripples of you doing healing work. And then all of a sudden I saw multiple pebbles dropping in with multiple epicenters and then hundreds of epicenters rippling out. And it said, and the message I got was, this is you teaching. And you're teaching each one of these pebbles are also setting out ripples. So the amount of people who you can impact in a positive way, the healing you can do by teaching is exponential, greatly exponential to what you can do on your own. And so that was fascinating. I was like, oh, I guess I'm meant to teach. That's interesting. Huh. And I kind of thought about that. I said, well, okay, I didn't really even think about creating a website to, or adding to my website to have a formal curriculum. I was just sort of like, well, that's interesting. I'm meant to teach. Huh, I wonder where I'd find people who'd be interested in learning. And then, so she left, she went home, and a couple of days later, I checked my Facebook Messenger feed for my business, which I actually never had checked at that point in time. I just really didn't check it at all. And there was a message. In fact, I didn't even know, this is a little embarrassing, but I didn't even know that your business page could have a messenger on it. Okay, yeah, that was me that was me 10 years ago. Okay, so catching up to the, it's organic, it's not a marketing thing. And I was like, oh, look, there's a little number here on that. Oh, I wonder what that is. Oh, look, there's a message on my business page. That's interesting. I didn't know that you could get a message on your business page. And I open it, and it's a woman from England. And
wow.
it's a 2-week-old message, which is, could be 20 years in the cyber world. From 2 weeks ago, hey, I'm interested in learning what you do. Is there any way that you would teach me? And I'm like, going,
Wow.
wow, the same thing, right? And so I go, oh my God, that's really interesting. And I go, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I didn't respond to you right away. I just saw this message because I never actually check this message. And so sorry, it's been sitting here for 2 weeks. And she's like, I'm like, if you're still interested, I'm happy to have a call with you, because she wanted to do a Zoom call to see if it was right. And so she's like, oh yeah, I was just about to sign up for something else, but I actually was much more drawn to you. Let's have a conversation. And so we had a conversation, and she's like, yep, I'm going to come for 8 weeks, or no, 6 weeks, starting next month. And so boom, there was my second student that showed up, right? And so she shows up, and we do our 6 weeks working together. And right at the end of her time with me, I was doing a session on someone else, not her. A client had actually, there's also really funny, there was another retreat on the island led by another retreat facilitator. And a woman from that retreat had booked a session with me. And after the session, she goes, that was really helpful. I need to bring this other woman who's on the retreat to you for a session. She really needs help. I said, yeah, sure. I can see her tomorrow. That's not a problem. And so, or the next day, whatever. So she did, and she actually went and she drove them all the way around from Waimea. So, and drove her here and paid for her session, because she was like, I'm fine, I'm fine. She comes into the session. She had she had been on disability. She had had a stuttering issue. For 5 years, she was previously a early childhood educator in arts. Really wonderful woman, beautiful person, beautiful heart, beautiful soul. And so I do this session on her, and we got to the core of it, and the stuttering disappeared.
Wow.
And she'd had it for 5 years. And she said, I want to come for a follow-up session next week. I said, sure, that's fine. So she came next week. We did a follow-up session. And afterwards, she looks at me, she goes, I want to learn what you do. Really? Okay, because now the second woman had just finished. I go, oh, okay. Yeah,
It's almost like the universe knows how stubborn you are, that you'll need like sign after sign after sign. I'm the same way. I feel like I'm the same
totally,
way.
totally like that thick head got to penetrate through all that logic mind programming, right? And
Hmm.
so literally she said that, and you know where this is going. And except the funny thing is she goes, yeah, I'm canceling my plane ticket home. She was supposed to fly out 2 days later back to her home. She's like, I'm gonna stay for 8 weeks and learn with you. And so there was
Wow.
8 more weeks. And then that same pattern continued for a full calendar year where people just kept showing up in similar ways. And then after a full calendar year, I was like, my wife again was like, you need to start teaching groups, not individuals. I go, really? She goes, yeah. I'm like, we didn't really have the space for it. And at that time, there's a woman, a friend of mine here, and she came, and her husband happens to be her partner is a building contractor, lovely couple, great people, and she was here studying with me, and in the journey we like in the journey work in the studying, I shared with her this is what I'm thinking about, and it came like, oh yeah, yeah, my partner can help you with that. And that's when we built our workshop space. And so it really came from people coming, and then we built a workshop space, and then we had to wait through the whole permitting and all that process, and then we started offering group classes, so that's kind of how it evolved.
It's so beautiful because when I think about divine orchestration or like divine paths, I think that people who aren't like living and breathing this spiritual path, I think that they think that, we are these like go-getters. We listen to every sign, we act on every impulse. And it's, and then you're laughing because we have to get hit over the head many, many times, I feel. Even living and breathing this path for 4 years, I'm resistant, just like every human on this planet can be resistant at times. And so what I love about your story is your path never really gave up on you. Like, thankfully, because here you are now 10 years later. But when I was looking for a shaman teacher, it came, the shamanism thing came to me in my version of a journey at the time. It was just I was channeling a lot. My gifts had blown up in 2020 like many others had. And it was like you're meant to like learn this tool, the shamanism tool. And it came from my own channeling, but then it came from a Reiki healer friend of mine. And it was just this like really clear, obvious thing. And then I was like, okay, how do I find a shaman teacher? Like where do I even like, do I go into the woods and hope I run into somebody that, like I had no idea. And what's really wild about it is I looked a few times online, like, okay, let me look up shaman teachers, whatever. And it was just an open search and I didn't find anything that resonated. And then the fourth time I looked, I didn't change my search parameters, nothing. You were at the top. You were like close to the top of the search. I know for someone who doesn't work on their marketing, that's pretty impressive, right? And so I was like, okay, and then I went to your website. I was like, this feels aligned. And then I followed the thread. And so it's such a testament, I think, to those of us who are walking our path. I mean, we're doing our best. We're getting the signs. We're trying to act on the wisdom and the information that we're receiving. And yet, sometimes it takes time and time and time and time again. Have you found that it ever kind of gives up on you, or are you just
The path doesn't give up on me, and I have actually gotten a lot better at not needing to be clubbed over the head with it so many times. Um, Usually because of my wife helps me out because she sees it, and so I've learned to
yeah.
listen to her a little bit more,
Mm.
about like these types of things. But I'm in addition to her wonderful input and support in my life. Um, Also, I've gotten much better at listening and I should say hearing
Mhm.
what is actually being guided to me. And at that time when I was so filled with self-doubt, I was only half listening. And now I feel like I listen 95, 98% of the time. Try to do 100% of the time, but I'm sure there's times that I don't. But much more frequently, I'm listening, and I've been using this path and this guidance to determine my life, or the course of my life, the path of my life for the last 10 years. And wow, could never, if you had given me a pen and a paper 10 years ago and said, draw up what you want your life to look like, I never would have been able to draw this up, and it's way better than anything I would have been able to imagine at that time. And so there's a deep lesson in that about the unfolding of the past. And, certainly it's important to plan. It's important to have vision. It's equally important to have flexibility within that vision to allow it to manifest and grow organically, so we're not stuck in a box. We need to have that space within which our vision can flourish. So, I also have some training in Ayurvedic medicine. I did go to a college for Ayurveda for 2 years. And within part of their teaching, the Vedic teaching, which is a little different than the Chinese medical teaching, their 5 elements are space, air, water, fire, earth. And the space element, which they call Akash or Akasha, we tried to understand and explain what it was in the class. Like, it's pretty obvious what the fire element is in the body, or what the air element is, or the water element, or the earth element, especially within the doshas, and how the disease manifests and health can be restored. But the whole class was having a hard time, and the teacher actually was also having a hard time explaining what the space element was. What is Akasha, and how does that apply to us as humans in our experience? And so finally they just kind of read out of the text. I don't know if it was the Sharaka Samhita or one of the other texts, the traditional text, that, oh, Akasha is the element that gives space in which things to manifest. But even the teacher couldn't really understand what that meant. And now on this path, I realized, oh, that's what they're talking about. The space, or the field, giving the space for things to come into creation. And allowing that space, and how important that is. And so when we don't have that spaciousness or that space, our life becomes compressed, and our ability to manifest becomes compressed and limited. And in addition to that, it has other factors on a health level, what they would describe as, say, vitiated vata, which is feeling overwhelmed. Feeling overwhelmed, and
Yeah.
oh my God, I got too much to do. I'm running everywhere. We don't have enough space. So that space element is actually often really out of balance in our society. It feels very compressed and pushed down a lot of times. And so that's one of the things that we bring forth, is to create that space around us through the shamanic work, right? And there's different way, the different ways that we do that, the different techniques and strategies that we have to do that.
Tell us about shamanism. So those who are listening, I know that we've kind of been dancing around it a little bit, but can you define shamanism for listeners who are new to the art of shamanism?
Sure. So shaman is actually a Siberian word, and it basically means medicine person, or someone who works in the spirit world, who interfaces with spirits for the benefit of their community or their tribe. And shamanism, well, hopefully for the benefit of their community or tribe. And so shamanism has been practiced all over the world for 50,000 years. It's the oldest form of healing that there is, shamanism and animism. Animism is slightly different, because animism is the belief that everything has a spirit. A tree, an animal has its own spirit. It's animated. And shamanism is slightly different than animism, because rather than just praying to the spirit of the tree, the shaman enters a state of consciousness that allows them, he or she, to communicate with, whether it's a tree or an animal or an ancestor. Okay, so that's basically what shamanism is, and it can be used in a positive way or a negative way. So when I teach, I'm always teaching for the light. I have, as you know, an ethical code of conduct that everyone who studies with me and works with me needs to use this work for life affirming purposes. There are, unfortunately, people who use these types of skills for parasitic reasons, to personal gain and to feed off of others, and I won't allow that. It's very important. Anybody who's listening that's interested in studying shamanism, please make sure that you are clear with whomever you decide to study with or considering studying with, that they're going to be working in a life-affirming way. And yes, you can ask the question directly, but also look and make sure that everything is in right alignment energetically, that there's a clear and upfront exchange of what's happening, that whether it's monetary or some other form of exchange, because if that isn't clearly delineated up front, then there's going to be some back door in which there's going to be energy that's siphoned off. And when you're working with people who have experience working in the spirit world, and you're just learning, you have to be very mindful and aware of who you are entrusting to lead you down that path, and that they work with a very clear set of ethical values. That's extremely important.
That notion of integrity, and I'm thinking also there's layers to integrity. It's something that I've been contemplating for a while, but spiritual integrity and being in the highest spiritual integrity. I know that there are a lot of folks newer to their spiritual path who are listening. So what is a way that they can ensure that the person that they are hiring for either spiritual healing or as a teacher, like what are some ways that you recommend that they do connect with this sense of, okay, we're in alignment from an integrity perspective?
Well, number one is trust your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Don't gaslight yourself. I was just, you know, I was just at a woman who I receive massage from. And twice a month I go and get a massage. So understand this, everybody. If you're a provider, no matter what you're providing, whether you're a shaman or a masseuse or a therapist or a doctor or a chiropractor or anyone in the healing arts, please don't make the mistake of believing that just because you're a provider, you can no longer also be a client. Get the support you need. It's very important. Okay.
Right.
It's very important to receive that support and build that community. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with you receiving support from someone else and then receiving support from you, as long as those boundaries are well delineated. So anyway, the reason why I mentioned the massage therapist that I go to is because I was speaking with her and she was sharing with me about someone who she has trepidation about within our community here. And of course, I've been in this community for a long time, and so I'm familiar with this person, and she trusts my judgment around people. And basically what's been happening is this person who she has trepidation about had been all of a sudden showing up in her energy field nearby, like running into her, showing up at her birthday, inviting herself to her birthday party, showing up with a friend of hers, a mutual friend at the beach. And she started to say to herself something like, well, I don't feel comfortable with this person, but she seems to be friends with a lot of people I know, so she must be okay. And I said to her, I said, don't gaslight yourself. Trust your intuition. Okay, so even if all the outward logic mind signs are saying, oh, yes, this person has the degrees, and oh, yes, this person has, 30,000 students and all these reviews. And if your inner feeling is telling you no, please trust that and find somebody else. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is bad. They could provide an excellent service, but it might not be the right match for you.
Right.
Also, there are a lot of people who are really good at marketing. And there's this whole people who put themselves up to be the guru and to create a hierarchy. And so that's another thing I would also look for, is make sure there's no hierarchy or hierarchical structure within that shamanic teaching. Yes, the teacher has more experience than you, but anybody who tries to set themselves up as in a hierarchy where you have to talk to someone to talk to someone to talk to them, and their intuition or their connection with Creator and Mother Earth is more valid than yours, walk away, run away, disengage immediately. Because yes, I have more experience than most of my students do, obviously, in shamanism. That's why I'm teaching. However, once we've made sure that each student is connecting directly to their spirit guides and to their benevolent spirit guides, and we can get into that in a moment. What the information that they're receiving is equally valid to the information that I'm receiving. I am just helping them to develop their language of communication with spirit. So you might see something and then you say, I saw this and I don't know what it means. So I'm not going to interpret that for you, as you know. I'm going to tell you, give you some guidelines about questions to ask. When I saw a blank, what does that mean? So go back and journey again. Ask your power animal, when you showed me this or told me this, I don't really understand that. What does that mean? Please explain this to me in a way that I can understand. And that helps each individual develop their own language of communication with spirit. And that's really what this is about, is developing a language of communication with the spirit world. Because we've lost that. When we were in clan groups and tribal societies, there was already a language of communication to the spirit world. That was already there. It was built into the society. It also varied by culture. So in one culture, seeing an owl outside of its normal daily routine in the wild could be a really bad omen, like someone might be going to die soon. And a lot of tribal cultures in the United States or Turtle Island believe that. In other cultures, it's a sign of good fortune, sexuality, sensuality, creation, birth, things like that. Magic. Which is right? They're both right. They're both right. So don't run to a book. So what I'm teaching people is not to run to a book and look up what does it mean, because it can mean different thing to different people, but to establish that language of communication so that we know what it means for you, which might be different than what it means for me, and that's totally okay. You know, just like I have a relationship with a particular individual is going to be unique and distinctly different than your relationship with that individual. They may still have similar personality traits, but we might share a different overlap than you would share with that individual.
Absolutely. And I love that, because there is so much data out there. If we search, the spiritual meaning of owl, to stay with your example, there's so much information. None of it is absolute. None of it is completely untrue. And there's this evolution that I feel I've been through and on my path, my spiritual path of, okay, I get to trust that my connection is paramount, my connection to the spirit world, my connection to that owl I just saw in the wild. I can actually convene and I can commune with that owl to get the message, but I have to be able and willing to trust myself and my gifting.
Exactly. And that's how much more empowering that is than you picking up the phone and saying, hey, Scott, I saw an owl. What does that mean?
Right.
This is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of not having an intermediary. Any teacher that is teaching you that and how to do that authentically for yourself, to commune directly to that owl and get its message directly, is doing a good job.
Right.
Any teacher that is telling you, come to me whenever something happens so I can interpret it for you, no, run away. Because there's always going to be an ask on the other end of that. There's always going to be an ask on the other end of it. Okay, it's one thing, you have a young child, that's fine with your child to help them create an interpretation system and also to help them learn to do it for themselves. But as far as adult to adult, when we're adulting with each other, no, absolutely not. We should not be trying to disempower our students in that way. And I'm not saying it's always done intentionally. There are times when teachers do that unintentionally, right? They may not be aware of it. They may be just trying to help. Oh, you saw an owl. Well, that means this, and I want to help. They're usually kind of younger souls who are a little bit over eager for their students to get it, and perhaps, or for their students to heal, and perhaps invested in the healing of their students in a way that isn't healthy, like in kind of a codependent way. So there are often teachers and healers who need their students or clients to heal in order to hit that little insecure part within themselves of, I'm a good healer, you healed.
Yeah.
Well,
And
wait, where did you go? You just got erased out of that equation there, right?
right. And what it brings up also is this, as a healing practitioner myself and somebody who mentors people to step into their divinity, to step into their divine gifting, there's a component of when there is a client of mine or somebody that I'm mentoring who is like, I need you to tell me what this means. What does this mean? Sending me their dreams and asking me to interpret them. I feel out of integrity when I'm pulled on in those ways because I don't believe that that is my role. My role isn't to be the one who is translating these messages for you. I'm not the one who's meant to be channeling for you in those ways. I know that there are channels who exists in that way, but that's not my medicine. And so there's also this question of, okay, is this person that I'm working with in integrity, but also am I feeling as though I'm operating in my own integrity in the ways that I am doing my work, in the ways that I'm showing up for the people that I'm meant to work with?
Yeah, thank you, Leilani, for sharing that. And
Mhm.
absolutely. And the way I stay in my integrity with that is, well, you know what I do. I say, well, why don't you journey to the
Yeah, you just tell us to go do the work. Kick
yeah,
us
go
out.
and yeah, go do yeah, why don't you journey to that yourself
Mhm.
and find out and then tell me what you're shown. So I can
Mhm.
still provide that support because a lot of times they're not really necessary. I don't feel like my students are ever trying to pull me out of integrity, but I feel
Right.
like they're reaching for support in an area that may be unfamiliar for them
Mhm.
and perhaps a little scary, in the sense of being, I'm not sure. So they're lacking confidence. So I can still
Mhm.
give that support by saying, guiding them through the process of how to find it for themselves. And then saying, and once you've done that, come back to me and share with me, and then I'll add more. So
Right.
oftentimes I will see, and the other part is sometimes it's easier for people outside to see it than the person inside. Just like my wife
Mhm.
sees stuff for me and is like, Scott, you need to start teaching more. You need to teach groups or you need to teach online. All that was her idea, right? I never did any of that.
Thank goodness for Penelope.
That's right. Thank you. Thank goodness for Penelope kind of kicking me down the line there to do what, maybe I would have eventually found it, but it would have, you know, been a little longer. Um, so there is that part where I can often see things more clearly for someone else than they can see for themselves. And there's a valid part of that.
Mhm.
But there's that fine line of mentoring and helping them to learn that for themselves. And then once they've made that effort, then you can come in and say, oh yeah, and I also feel like it might also have to do with this. Why don't you journey on that too and check and see if I'm correct? And
Mm.
so you can kind of add on to it. So someone might share a dream, for example, in your example, a dream with you, and then you could say, well, why don't you think about what this means to you and what that means to you and the different elements of the dream. And then and then once you've done that and put that together, come back to me with what you think. And then when they've done that work, then you can kind of start to fill in the blanks for them. Because then
Mhm.
you're not intermediating in a way that is cutting them off, but you're helping them, and then you're just giving them that little extra boost that they may not
Mhm.
see for themselves. And then they'll go, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But you're empowering them, you're helping them then put together the
Mhm.
language in a coherent way. The way, because you're making them do the first part of the work for themselves.
Yeah.
And then you're adding on that little extra piece, and they're like, oh yeah, now that does make sense as a full sentence.
And I think what I feel I do well with my clients in these ways is they'll come back after they're like, okay, I've meditated or I've thought about this, I've been sitting with the energy of this, and here's what I came to. And what I feel like I'm really good at is saying, okay, that absolutely what you said here is divine. This is like an old story. This is, because so often our clients, the people with whom we're supporting, are kind of getting the chatter along with the divine messages. And I'm like, okay, let me help you delineate. Let me help you discern. This is an old story. This is an old frame. And this is actually the medicine that you're receiving. And so how are you going to begin to interact with knowing that though, like this part is it helped to keep you safe at some point, and it's time to let it go. And this is the medicine, this is the path forward. And yeah, so it's really expansive when we think about the ways that we are receiving information. And I guess what I'm getting, what I'm channeling in this moment is for those who are like, I can't ever tell the difference. Like, is this my mind or is this what? Your guides, your ancestors, source God, the universe, spirit will never, ever, ever, never, ever, ever, and I don't say this often, but will never, ever, ever put you down. Will never make you feel dumb. Will never tell you you're stupid. Will never say you're not good enough. The energy of the medicine that Scott has taught me to connect with and that I connect with all the time is so rooted in love and self-confidence and self-trust. And that is the way that we know the difference. And if it's coming from your mind and it's rooted in all of those things, and maybe it was also meant to come from your mind, right? So I think that is what a lot of people struggle with. And I think it's really beautiful that you create containers where people can build that self-confidence because it's so needed in our world.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Leilani. And that's a great service that you provide for people by helping them distinguish between what's the chatter of their monkey mind and what's true spiritual guidance. And it's very important because we need to be able to distinguish that, our direct connection with Creator, our grounding in Mother Earth, so that we do get those messages directly and we're not confused, right? We don't get confused because there is a lot of influence. There's a lot of influence out there that has been studied, just in media in general, especially device and social media. So we've been doing a little bit of research on this and how it especially affects teenagers in that developmental stage of life when they start to get access to devices. And what basically happens is the screens themselves are programmed at a rate in which it allows the person to entrain in a high theta, low alpha brainwave state. And that's the most suggestible state. And that's the same state of being in which we have our dreams and our shamanic journeys. And so that's where we imprint on our limbic brain. Okay, so this is the power of shamanic work done in the light in the positive way. Okay, we access those specific brainwave states, we get information. Okay, we receive healing, and it overwrites those old patterns, those old agreements that we've had. Unfortunately, there's been neuroscience research done and then implemented with an agenda that is basically to drive advertising dollars and other political agendas, in which it's imprinted onto people, especially children, but people of all ages, in which they entrain with their device, and then whatever is being shown is being written into their limbic system. And our brains, though we will know, of course, I'm just watching a movie, the imprinting doesn't know. So there's a positive part about that in shamanic healing, right? I can experience a grave trauma, and then I can do a shamanic journey, and I can uproot that trauma and replace it with something else. But it works the other way too. And it does that way in media a lot of times about what's my appearance or violence or political stances or bigotry or whatever might be there that's being subtly or not so subtly programmed. And then if somebody entrains with that, especially a young person trains with that for hours and hours and hours, it begins to seep in, and that becomes the subconscious program from which they begin to act. And that's very unhealthy. That's very unhealthy. So learning to make those distinctions is very, very important. And that's part of what we do in the shamanic journey training, is learn how to make those distinctions between what is my monkey mind, what is my programming, and what is my spirit mind bringing me true messages. And that's why it's so important to work with benevolent helping spirits only.
Yes.
Especially in the beginning when we're learning. As we become advanced and we start to practice, we can help remove negative and disruptive spirits and parasitic spirits. But in the beginning, we don't want to touch any of that. We want to just stay with the benevolent spirits until our energy field, our energy body gets strong enough to hold that space. Because what we talked about earlier with Akasha and space, it's those disruptive spirits tend to enter the space and disrupt the space and collapse the space around us through creating drama, basically. And it's very important that we hold that space open for ourselves. Once we've learned how to do that, then we're able to manifest within that space, including helping others with that.
So you had mentioned like having the benevolent spirit guides rather than the malevolent or the disruptive. So people that haven't really worked with these energies yet, how do they access them? How do they know who they are? Benevolent ancestor, like, can you just, I know that's a big question for the end of our time.
So how do we access and make sure that we're accessing or working with only benevolent spiritual powers? So first of all, we live in what's called the middle world. And that's the world in which our flesh reality, our day-to-day reality, physical reality takes place. There's also a spiritual version of the middle world, which is where our intuition takes place. It's where the spirits that walk the land and the fairies in the garden, as well as the parasitic and disruptive spirits exist. Okay, then there's also what's called the upper and the lower world, which is not to be confused with heaven and hell. Okay, it's just to be clear. But those are also spiritual worlds, and they exist in the spirit form only. There's no physical equivalent to the upper and lower world, and they need to be accessed through a portal. Okay, and there's a gateway to the lower world, and multiple gateways to both, but each individual usually works with a specific gateway to the lower world and a specific gateway to the upper world that's unique to them, or sometimes unique to their clan or culture. And sometimes it's a tree, sometimes it's a cliff top, sometimes it's a spring or a hole in the ground or the ocean, cave, something like that, depending on whether you're going up or down. Once you go through those portals into the upper and lower world, you're working only with benevolent, helpful spirits. Okay, in those worlds, there is no evil. There's nothing that intentionally causes harm to others. Now, there may be what are called wrathful spirits in those worlds, but they're not really wrathful. They're just there to kind of act as guardians to make sure that you are serious and committed to the path, to test you. Are you really committed to this path? Do you really want to see and have the reflection of what is inside you, and these aspects of self-deception that we all have, right? We all have aspects of self-deception. The question is, am I ready to look at that for myself? And so we have these kind of gatekeepers and guardians there in both the upper and lower worlds that will test us. And once we say, yes, we want to know, they will reflect to us. And it might be hard to hear. Sometimes, what I say, as you probably remember, how do I know I'm not making this up? Well, if I make it up, my power animals wouldn't be putting me in my place all the time and going, Scott, you're acting like an idiot then. Right now, that's not putting me down. That's just the truth.
Yeah.
Like, duh, Scott, you didn't see what was going on. Right. And so this is true spiritual guidance. It's not all, unicorns and fairies. And it's it can be very extremely confronting, right? And so, yeah, you need to get in right relationship here. You weren't in right relationship when you acted in that way. That's true spiritual guidance from a benevolent guide that's saying, hey, get it together. Go apologize if you didn't do it right, or go fix it if you didn't do it right. Or if you're talking about something in the future, it might be, hey, that's not the path of right relationship. You need to do this instead, even though that might be what you think is harder. So we follow those things. So this is, again, learning how to journey to the upper and the lower worlds is the easiest way to make sure that we are working only with our benevolent spirit guides. Because in the middle world, there are definitely some benevolent ancestors around that are there as protectors for us, but there are also other spirits out there that are highly manipulative. And those parasitic entities, those parasitic spirits, tend to fool us by giving us what we think we want. For example, power, right? but they're parasitic, and so they keep feeding off that. And with the power comes drama, and with the power comes conflict,
Right.
and all these emotions that those parasitic entities feed off of. And so they can be highly manipulative and deceive us down a pathway when we're not actually working with something that's in right alignment. And then it creates all these justifications of why it's okay. And, not to delve into the world of politics, but we've seen a lot of justifications for bigotry recently that are getting a lot of media play. And, that is typical spiritual parasite involvement. That is a typical type of spiritual parasitic maneuver to gaslight in that way and say, well, it's okay because this is happening, or, to justify bad behavior. And the key is to understand that even if somebody else is behaving badly, that doesn't justify me behaving badly in
Right.
response,
There's
right?
always choice. We always
Allow
get to
that
choose.
person to keep their poison. Don't become that person, right? That doesn't, take the poison out of yourself, absolutely. But don't, and you can say, hey, this belongs to you, but then don't take your own poison and give it back to them. Okay.
I feel that that's happening a lot in kind of the mainstream spiritual community that I've been sensing is people being like, I recently posted something on social media, and I was just kind of speaking to the power of the way that our collective is moving forward, our spiritual collective who are operating in the light. And then somebody was like, yeah, we were burned as witches and now we're burning back. And it's like, yeah. And this energy of vengeance.
No.
And I really have to kind of take a step back sometimes, because I have to remember that people are in different phases of their spiritual becoming and their spiritual awakening. And if at any point we are still in that place, that means that there's still healing to be done. There's still a part within ourselves that we're not accepting. There's still a part of within ourselves that we're not loving. And yeah, so it's interesting to hear you speak on that, because it's so rampant right now, the eye for an eye. And it's never going to be nourishing. It will never be sustainable. And it's only going to keep us kind of driving down a path that won't actually change anything.
That's right. And it's not, it's not right relationship. Just because, in a past life I was burned as a witch, which is debatable. Maybe not for somebody else, but for me it's debatable. I don't think I ever was a witch or was burned at the stake. So I can't really speak from that experience. Okay. But even so, and as painful as that experience would be, doesn't mean that we want to exact that type of vengeance on someone else. However, putting things in right relationship where we're protecting everyone's spiritual sovereignty and freedom to practice spirituality is absolutely in right relationship, and to call that out. And so if someone comes with a specific religious programming that says you're not allowed to connect directly to God, you have to talk through this intermediary in order to talk to God, then we can call that out and say, hey, that's not acceptable, but I don't need to burn them at the stake.
Right.
Okay, that's not appropriate. And even if they're intentionally trying to subjugate people in that way, then we can point out like, well, hey, when we give that, then it creates manipulation and there's a programming, and we can expose it for what it is. And people just walk away and they stop paying attention to it. And that's the power right there, is if, that person gets up there and makes a speech and no one listens, right? It's like I can go out there and say whatever I want in my neighborhood. Do my neighbors listen? Not necessarily. Right? Does it have power? It only has power if people are engaged with it and buy into it. So the more that we can educate in that way around spiritual sovereignty and around some of these games that are being played, where if we have time, I'd like to just give one more example for listeners, because there is another thing to watch out for in terms of what to watch out for with a quote guru or teacher, is one of the games that's played is to encourage people to lift their energy upward, to move their energy, pump their energy up. So this happens a lot in Kundalini yoga. It happens at a lot of political rallies where people get very, very excited and they get their energy up. It happens at sporting events, though not with the intention to necessarily manipulate them. Okay, so anything where it makes our energy rise, when that energy rises up to the level of our third eye chakra opens and we become more susceptible to implanted suggestivity.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah. And so when you wonder why that, old guy missing a few teeth has a harem of 23, young women who are fawning all over him, because he is a master at being able to get people's energy up and suggest to them what they should do. Okay, so we try to bring our energy actually into the earth. And the deeper we go into the earth, then the higher we can go. But if you bring the energy up without the corresponding rooting into the earth, we become inherently suggestible. That's why they try to get people really excited at political rallies. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then they implant the suggestion about who to vote for or who to hate or who to love or whatever they're implanting. Okay. But it also happens in the spiritual community in a huge way, right? And we're just going to all meditate and we're all going to raise the energy up. And we're going to, I want you to focus on your third eye. I want you to imagine energy coming in through your third eye and then rising up to your crown. Please run away if you ever hear that stuff.
It happened to me.
Yeah.
That happened to me. It was very early in my spiritual journey and this opening that I was experiencing. And there was a very egotistical man. I'm just going to say he was a man. He was leading meditations. And I always thought it was curious. Like he always had these really beautiful women, it was so interesting to kind of witness that. But the person who was dating him at the time was a friend of mine and I trusted her. And so I went to one of his meditations. He had us, it was actually a really beautiful meditation and it supported me. But then I came out of it and he just started messaging me and was like, we're supposed to do a podcast together. He was just like, I could feel him infiltrating and luckily my intuition, even in those early phases, I knew that it was infiltration. I knew what he was doing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy has implanted these things in me. And my friends who had been on this path a little bit were like, you're more powerful than he is. He doesn't have the power to make you start a podcast with him. He doesn't have the power. And so, yeah, and I hesitated to even write about it in my book, my book when I was going through my spiritual awakening, because I was like, I don't want to give it any power. I don't want to give that experience any power. But I do want to ensure that listeners understand that that is a possibility, that happens. And to know that you have everything in your power to take a step back, to root into the earth, to ground yourself, and to know exactly what's true.
Yeah. Thank you, Ilani, for sharing that. That's really important. And it is an important thing to watch out. And I actually had a experience recently where, well, like a year and a half ago, I was with a friend of mine who I do Tai Chi with him. He was one of my students, and I would teach him several days a week, private Tai Chi class. And we became quite friendly. And he said, oh, I have another teacher. He's a meditation teacher. He gave me the book to read. The book sounded fine. He has a background in Qigong. He's a very well-developed Taoist and martial artist. You should meet him sometime. Okay. They're doing a workshop. It just happened to line up with my schedule about a year and a half ago for me or a year ago, to go and stop in Arizona on my way to New York and attend a 2 or 3 day weekend workshop that this guy was doing. And so my friend was raving about him, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go check him out. And he was very smooth, very sophisticated. But right in the beginning of the workshop, he's having everybody doing standing meditation, which I do through my own practice. And I said to him, hey, aren't we trying to connect to the center of the earth through our bubbling well points and pull the energy up from there? He goes, yeah, of course. Now, this is a workshop with 60 people in it, and I know that I'm more, advanced. And I said this to him in a private question. Then I know that I studied a lot more in those arts than some of the other people were beginners, right? And I was studying these arts for 20 years. And he never mentioned it once to the group. And so I was like,
Wow.
and then his energy was really like kind of weird with me when he said that. It was like he was brushing me off, right? And so what was very interesting is because then afterwards he would have these, like in between, you could come up and ask him questions. And whenever I would stand in line, he'd get to the person in front of me and then he'd turn around and walk away, wouldn't answer one more question for me the
His
entire time.
ego was activated.
Well,
Yeah.
it was not just his ego that was activated. It was also that his intent was to implant in people. And he got very
Mm.
nervous. Like when I first sat in before we even started, I saw him come on and he's wearing these robes and he come onto the stage and I'm kind of like, I'm just looking at him. He's a teacher, I'm going to like scan his energy field. He felt me scan him. He walked right over to me. He said, hi, who are you? And introduced himself because he could feel me
Yeah.
scanning him.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very interesting. And so then at the end of the whole weekend workshop, I I went up into the mountains and I did my own journey. And my guides came and they pulled these hooks out of
Yep.
there were 3 or 4, and I knew
Yep.
what was going on.
Yeah.
And I was watching for it, and I wasn't doing any of the exercises that would allow that to happen. I was keeping and there were still 3 or 4 hooks that he had managed to put in, and he never said a word. It was all done without non-verbally.
It's and to think of all of those folks who trust him, right? I mean, it's so, and this is why, I mean, those of us who are operating from a place of right relationship, operating in the light, we are a threat to those who have those intentions to, I don't even know. It's like, what do you, it's hard for me to even fathom what you do with that kind of, with those hooks, with that power. Obviously money, I mean, but whatever it is, it's just, we're a threat to that
Well, that's right,
existence.
because we shine the light in the shadow.
Right. Right. And they
It's
can't
more than
handle it.
money, it's energy. It's life
Mm-hmm.
force energy. So they're
Mm.
feeding on other people's life force energy in a parasitic way. So we can either get our energy from Creator and Mother Earth, or we can get our energy from other people.
That's
Now,
so
of course, we're going
gross.
to be socially, yeah, it's gross. We are going to, of course, interact and have these horizontal cords. But you know what we do in our coursework about which cords are healthy, which are not. The ones that are healthy have an equivalent energy exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a fair and balanced energy exchange. Doesn't have to be in the moment. It's not necessarily transactional to the penny, but there's always a balanced exchange of
Mm-hmm.
energy, a give and a take that's in right relationship. But I get my nourishment from Creator and Mother Earth. I don't get my nourishment from other people. I enjoy other people. I'm enjoying having this conversation with you, but I'm enjoying this conversation because there's a back and forth and a balanced flow of energy. But when I need to nourish myself, I don't sit there and go and like slurp up other people's energy. That's gross. And that's what this person was doing. And it was very dark because his wife was co-teaching with him. And as he was keeping everybody's attention in the front, they were having an exercise where they were pulling the energy back into the lower dantian. And his wife was going behind people and pulling it out of their kidneys and putting hooks into their kidneys, which is where the actual, like, yeah, it was really gross. And so when we see it for what it is and shine light on it, they get exposed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's extremely threatening. That's why they feel very threatened, people who operate that way. They feel very threatened by that type of situation. And it's very common. It's sadly very, very common. And for many people, they don't know they're doing it. Like, for example, your friend who vouched for
Mm-hmm.
her partner, she in her honest to goodness heart thought that this was a great thing and she was helping you.
Yeah.
Okay. She wasn't, she's not being intentionally manipulative. Now, the other guy, maybe not so much.
But
These,
totally.
right. But these people were very skilled. They knew exactly what they were doing. There was
Mm.
no self-deception there. The only self-deception for them was that they thought this would be a sustainable path for themselves. It's never a sustainable path because those parasitic entities always extract a price. When you're no longer of use to that parasitic entity, it will discard you just like it's been using everything else. So anyway, that's a little heavier than I was hoping to get into, but somehow
okay.
we went there, Leilani. I don't know.
Well, as we are ending then, so what I'm hearing for folks as because I know that this is kind of the shadow side. This is the darker side of being who we're meant to be in the spiritual path that we're walking. What I'm also hearing is the awareness of these darker energies is to support you. Like, we are not here to scare you. We're here to say these energies exist and you're powerful enough to A, identify them, and B, to avoid them if possible, and C, to move through that if that is the case. Like, you're powerful.
Right. Well, let's just say it. I agree with you, and I'd like to say it this way, that self-deception exists within all of us.
Sure.
That's the shadow. The shadow is our self-deception. And there are those of us who work in the light to help shine light in the areas of self-deception for those who want to have the light shown there. So in other words, I don't go into the store and talk to the checkout person about their self-deception, even if I can see it. Okay, it's not appropriate. That's rude. Okay,
There's no consent.
It's no consent. It's not my business. Okay, but talking about people who are actively consenting, informed consent, who want to know, there are healers and teachers who operate in the light, who shine the light, and this is what it means, in my opinion, to operate in the light is we will help you shine the light and help to shine the light for you on these areas of self-deception in a healing way so that you can see it for yourself, grow, heal, move forward. Okay,
Absolutely.
So we have this self-deception, we have the shadow. I will help you learn to shine the light on your own shadow. I will help to shine the light for you if you want help in that way. That's what session work is, to shine the light on your shadow with your consent. Okay, we can all see it, we can all read it, we can read other people. It's not a huge trick. Okay, then there are those other people who see your shadow, see your self-deception, and go, aha, here's an opportunity for me.
Yeah, to exploit it.
Right, exactly. And so this is where this goes back to your very first question of who do I work with? How do I know who to work with? When I'm looking through the variety of offerings out there, not just in shamanism, but in all sorts of spiritual pursuits, what are some of my criteria? So that distinction there of one, hierarchy, two, maybe hierarchy is number two. Number one, is this person, when they see self-deception, is it opportunistic for them to take advantage and exploit it? Or are they working with compassion and love to help those people for fair exchange? Right? And that's really where the criteria needs to be. When we're there and we're realizing that, okay, this person is working passionately with someone's shadow, with someone's pain, with someone's vulnerabilities, right? Wherever there's pain, wherever there's wounding, wherever there's vulnerability, there's also shadow, because there's a part that isn't resolved. That's the self-deception part. And the self-deception part is usually like, I'm over it, it's okay. It happened and I'm done. Well, if you were, it wouldn't be showing up right now.
Yeah, that's just bypassing.
Right, exactly.
Right.
That's part of the self-deception. So with the bypassing, look at how vulnerable that makes somebody to manipulation. Right? If you bypass it, then you can be easily manipulated by someone who doesn't work in the light, who works with ill intent or exploitative intent. Okay, and someone else might say, okay, I hear that, they might say it to themselves, I hear that this person isn't ready yet to face this. What layer can I point them to? Because they've come to me and asked for help. How can I point them in a way so that they can get that reflection and they can start working through this part that is very, very painful for them? Yeah.
Well, Scott, I wouldn't bring a fellow shaman onto this podcast and expect us to only operate in the light and to talk about the light. Our work is deeply rooted in understanding the shadow. So I thank you so much for all of it. The question that I always ask everybody as they are leaving is, what is your bumper sticker? Meaning, like, what is your one piece of wisdom that you would put all over the world if you could?
Connect to Creator, ground and Mother Earth, walk in right relationship.
Ooh, that has a nice Trinity kind of ring to it. I love it. Thank you, Scott. Now, I'm sure there are going to be many, many people who will want to either learn from you, or I don't think you're doing as much session work now. You're doing mostly teaching these days, correct?
I'm still doing sessions, but mainly for my
Okay.
students, mainly for my students. Yeah,
Awesome. So
for
I'm in.
and for people who want to learn. If
Yeah.
you think you might want to study, but you want to get a better feeling for what I do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can they find you? And this will also be in the show notes.
Thanks. Yeah, it's shamanicspiritmedicine.com. So pretty straightforward. And shamanicspiritmedicine@gmail.com if you want to.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Scott. It is just an honor to have you on. I appreciate all of the light that you have brought to my life over the last 4 years, and I thank you so much and I honor you.
Thank you, Leilani. Thanks so much for having me.
Y'all, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation with my friend and mentor and teacher, Scott Silverstone. Gosh, when I think about what I am taking away from this conversation, there's so many, but I really appreciate Scott's ability to kind of call out the bullshit. Like, there's so much in this spiritual realm, this walking our path. There's so much that we must consider. And when we think about what does it mean to be in integrity and alignment, what does it mean to interact with people in the 3D or energies that are not in our highest interest, that are not necessarily benevolent at all times, how do we make choices around that? How do we remember our power? How do we trust ourselves? It's so potent and it's so powerful. And I'm just really grateful that you are here to witness the brilliance that is Scott Silverstone. If you'd like to connect with Scott, you can find all of his information in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find my information there as well. But for now, be still, my friends, and live into your impact. I'm so grateful you're here, and I'll talk with you soon.